Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Age Group Triathlon podcast, where in this week's episode I'm chatting with one of my athletes, Elliott, who managed to put in a massive 30-minute PB over the same course at an Olympic distance race. Now, a few caveats here. Firstly, is that it is 2 years between these PBs, so there is a lot of work that's gone in the meantime. But I think that really does show the importance of the long game and sticking with things long term rather than looking for fast fixes in the immediate. A lot of triathletes they sort of they overestimate what it is that they can achieve in the short term and underestimate what can be achieved with sort of long-term thinking. The other caveat is that ahead of his previous race, he did have a nasty bike crash a few weeks before, so it wasn't maybe at complete peak fitness, but nonetheless, this is still fantastic achievement. And I thought, you know what, when he messaged me his result, I thought I'd get him on the podcast on the day of, so that he can be, really like pumped and enthused and excited and share all of his insights from the race. May not be my best idea. I think part of him just needed a little bit of needed to go to bed, needed a bit of a sleep after the exertions of the race. He apologised for rambling afterwards in a text message, but I assured him there's plenty of rambling on this podcast. I do a good enough job of that myself. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump into this conversation that I had with Elliott, which I really hope you enjoy. Hello, Elliott.
Hey, Simon.
Welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. You've just had a good morning of racing, haven't you?
I have indeed, yes. I just taken 30 minutes off my personal best for the Dorney triathlon Olympic distance.
Which I think, I think a lot of people are willing to cut off a limb to get a 30-minute PB over the Olympic distance. That's quite an achievement. Now, I I was looking at the last Olympic that you did on
Hmm.
Training Peaks, and it was back in September 2023, I believe. There
Yep,
we go.
that's right.
So obviously this is a PB that has been 2 years in the making.
Yes,
Yeah. But if you can just, while you're still on this sort of this high from the race, can you just tell us sort of how the race went from your perspective, where you felt you got that time from? Share with the listeners like where you like the changes you made to strategy and pacing and where you felt that came from. Um, and then what we'll do is we'll have a little bit look at the data from Training Peaks and see, if we can give people some hard and fast sort of numbers.
sure. The race was wetsuit legal, which will
Oh,
impact some people, but won't impact others. I think it was 21.5 degrees. Um,
yep.
it was a big mass start, by which I mean I think 150 people started at the same time, and the washing machine effect was
Mm-hmm.
painful. I definitely got kicked square in the face more than once, which was not very pleasant. But I think because there was such a washing machine, there was also a lot of drafting on the swimming,
Mm-hmm.
which, having done years and years of swim lessons as a kid, meant that I could take advantage of that and
Mm-hmm.
ended towards the front end of the first large pack that formed, which which worked really well for me. And I came out of the swim just shy of 26 minutes. Um, in terms of the transition, I think I did a relatively good job doing the transition, although it was a fairly pedestrian transition in the sense that I didn't do any sort of flying mount or anything. I just,
Mm-hmm.
put my shoes on in transition, grabbed my gels. I had pre-prepped. I'd made my own homegrown, what do you call it, carb drink, which was
Mm-hmm.
just one electrolyte tablet plus some sugar plus a little bit of salt,
Yep.
and then another one with orange squash and some salt on the back, as
Mm-hmm.
the prices of these things can get quite extortionate quite quickly. And
Yeah,
headed
well,
off.
if you're using, branded carb mix for every single workout, then it
Ugh.
does. And I talked chats about this in last week's episode. Actually, there is like whether you're making your own energy bars or you're just buying a bag of Haribo or something. For a lot of races, especially Olympic, where the fueling isn't quite as critical. Yes, you need something, but
Mm.
it's not like you need a nailed down nutrition strategy like you might need to for 70.3 or Ironman. Um, that actually you can get by with an awful lot and save yourself a good chunk of change. But yeah, sorry, continue telling us about the bike.
Yeah, no problem. So anyway, yeah, headed off on the bike. It was a relatively quiet course for the first lap, as I did come out towards the front end of the swim. Um, there was a bit of a headwind down the one side of the straight, which if people have done Eton Dorney before, is the bit close to the lake as you head down that big straight. It's slightly uphill, although the whole course is basically flat.
Hmm.
And so in the aero position on my Trekkimondo with put on aero bars,
Hmm.
uh, and just kind of started putting down some power. Felt relatively good for the first couple of laps, at which point there started to be a lot more people on the course, which inevitably improves the drafting effect slightly. Because you can't help in a course that's relatively enclosed to get some sort of drafting effect from people, even if you're regularly overtaking them, you'll get a bit of a
Mm.
draft off one person and a bit of a draft off the
Absolutely. I
next.
think you have to actually be like 50 meters behind somebody or more before you get zero drafting effect. So even the 12-meter rule or 20 meters that they have at the T100, like you're still getting a really good benefit from that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the only thing is there's a couple of technical bits on the course, which when you have slower, less confident cyclists, it becomes somewhat tricky to overtake them because you
Hmm.
don't know what they're going to do. So if you
Yeah.
try and go around them on the outside, they might randomly veer out. And if you try and cut the corner tightly and they suddenly try and correct a move they've been doing, you're just going to crash. So I lost
Hmm.
a little bit of time there, but
You did the right thing though. It's not worth risking like ruining your race and somebody else's because you wanted to save 3 seconds.
well, exactly. But fundamentally, I just tried to keep my power relatively consistent, and I had an idea of the power I could hold because of a session that you'd very kindly given me a couple of weeks ago, which was just ride for 2 hours as hard as you can till your eyes bleed. So I knew what the top end of what I could hold was, knowing then that I shouldn't push past that because I was going to suffer on the run.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, the bike course was fine enough. I I actually had carbohydrates on the bike course, which I think the last time I did the race, I just didn't really take on any fueling. I definitely didn't do electrolytes. I would have just done water, which was
Mm.
a big mistake from the past. But then, came off the bike course and just started running, um, and held a pace that I felt was comfortable, which was, well, it was a 10K PB for me today. So, very happy with that.
Can't argue with that, can you?
No, but it was just holding something that felt comfortable. And then, so it was a 2 lap course of 2 5 kilometer laps. The first, the first lap, I definitely kept within my means. And the last 2.5 kilometers of the second lap, I just kind of let loose. I
Hmm.
picked someone a bit in front of me that I know had been in front of me for a while and decided I was going
Yeah.
to try and close that gap. And I didn't because they sped up too, but it gave me something to aim at in the spirit of racing.
Yes.
Um,
No, I think that's really helpful to have little targets, whether it's people that you're lapping or you're just catching up to. It can really help inspire you and push you forwards because it really is difficult, and you obviously did a really good job today. It's really difficult to get to the finish and feel that you've wrung every last little bit that you can out of your legs.
mm,
Because what you don't want to do is your legs don't want to go pop after 5K. And you
yeah,
think, oh, I've messed this one up. But equally, if you finish and you think I could probably go out and do another 5K and like at that pace actually, then you can't help but feel a bit disheartened, like, oh, like I didn't really like show up for myself today. So
mm,
I think that's definitely like trying to close down someone who you know that as you are coming to those last couple of kilometers, you are starting to build up that lactic acid in the legs. You are going over that threshold, your heart rate is climbing higher to an unsustainable level. But that's okay because you're going to be done in about 5 or 6 minutes, you know?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, I feel like I did a really good job overall in the race. Inevitably, I feel like there are places that I could improve without getting any fitter. Things
hmm
like actually learning how to do a proper mount of some description,
hmm
which would improve transitions, and pacing could also be ever so slightly better. But that's a race practice thing.
Mm.
I think one thing that I would like to do in the future is to have a race where I blow up.
Yeah.
Specifically because then I know what too much is. Because you
Yeah,
always
yeah.
wonder, could I have gone 5 watts harder? Could I have done an extra, gone 5 seconds per, not five, yeah, 5 seconds per kilometer quicker,
Mm.
and still been fine? And finding out where that limit
Mm.
is at some point when my fitness stops improving, so that if I do 2 races 3 months apart, I'll just be fitter for the next one.
Yep.
When that stops being quite so true, working out roughly where I can hold is probably going
Yeah.
to be a worthwhile
I
exercise.
think the way that I would recommend that you go about this is you just set yourself a really ambitious bike wattage target. You
Yeah,
just go
yeah,
like, okay, let's do like 255.
yeah.
You know, let's really throw it against the wall and see if it sticks.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, we can look at the intensity factor, we can look at the percentage of FTP, we can look at all of this. But your FTP test is only a measurement of how you performed on one day.
Yep.
So if you have been underperforming in your FTP tests because you just haven't gone deep enough and you haven't really got everything you can out of your legs, your FTP could be sort of 5, 10 watts under red. Again, I'm not suggesting this is the case for you. I'm speaking on a more sort of broader sense
Hmm.
here. That it's very easy to think, oh, I can't go over this number. But that, especially over a sprint and Olympic, you just have to let loose sometimes. And I remember I was coaching a guy pre-COVID, and he was a fantastic runner, and we were looking to get around the kind of like 17-minute mark for
Hmm.
5Ks. And he said that he finished the first 1K of his race. He looked down at the split on his watch and it scared him, so he backed off.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whereas if he'd just put a piece of tape over his watch and just gone, I'm going to get my head down and I'm going to go absolutely all out, what could he have achieved? I actually went under 18 minutes for a 5K once. And at the time, it was a handicap race. So we were being set off in groups with like
Hmm.
equally kind of able runners. And I went off with this guy. And and little did I know he was actually a much better runner than I am. He probably sandbagged
Hmm.
his benchmark time, knowingly because he wanted to get an advantage or unknowingly, whatever reason. And I just focused on holding this guy's feet. And at the time, I was like a high 19 something 5K runner.
Hmm.
And I came across the line because we were passing loads of people because we were one of the last to leave in this handicap race. We passed a bunch of people, especially in the last kilometre when in a handicap race everything bunches together. And we just driving, and I'm not trying to beat him. It's more that I'm trying to keep up with him.
Yep.
And we crossed the line, and I pressed stop on my Garmin because it had been bleeping away. But I was just suffering so hard that I wasn't even paying attention to it. I came down, I looked, and I saw it started with 17 on my watch. I was like, where did that come from? I bypassed the 18 something and went straight to the 17 something because I just had to trust.
Hmm.
And because my mind was switched off from what my body was telling me, and instead it was all about just keep up with this guy. Sometimes I was running alongside him, sometimes I was running behind him, sometimes a little gap opened and I then closed it. But it is, but if I took the data from that run and calculated my zones off of that,
Hmm.
would that necessarily be good training zones? Good question, isn't it? If it was just a 1 in a million performance, all my training zones going to be too high.
Hmm.
And something that I think I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago is that the concept that, some people have what they call a vanity FTP, where they have an
Mm,
FTP they manage to achieve once, and they're convinced that that is an accurate number for them, but they're failing workouts. Their heart rate is sky high in zone two and like exponentially increasing to the point they can't actually do them more than 90 minutes in zone two.
mm,
But they keep telling everyone, "Oh, this is my FTP. I did this." Especially if the FTP came from something that was like a 2 by 8 minute test or a
mm,
ramp test, something that's a little less sort of thorough and
mm,
accurate, that it can really affect somebody's training and ultimately their performance because they're not actually getting good training.
mm,
They're just clinging on to the idea that they have this kind of this is their FTP, and yeah, they tell everyone how it is that they achieve that FTP, and they brag to everyone at the coffee shop. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, um, but it is yeah, just it's a mixture between like diving really hard, going really deep on race day, and just kind of looking beyond that data and actually asking yourself what is actually sustainable, what is good for training, and what is
mm,
good for racing, because they can often be two slightly different answers. Unfortunately, it's not very clear cut.
mm. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So I've got the data here from the previous race that we did at Eton Dorney. So we're going to go through the different disciplines and sort of and compare the times and just have a chat about what it is that you felt were really made the difference between each of those times.
Mm,
As well as, if you could share with, the listeners some of the sessions that you felt were the most important, or changes to nutrition, just your approach to it, all of that. It is, and again, I should point out the race that we're comparing ourselves to in 2023, if I recall correctly, it might have been one of your very first Olympic distances, if not your first.
it was my second Olympic distance race,
Hmm.
which happened about 4 weeks after I had a bike crash that landed me in hospital, or maybe it was 6 weeks after.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the lead into, whilst I had a good sort of 6 months training up till that point, I had a much better performance in my first Olympic
Mm. Yeah.
than the one that we're comparing to at the same course, because yeah, I was out of training for a few weeks, and then I was scared to get back on the bike, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. And again, I'm not saying it's a sort of a completely fair comparison, but I guess what the beauty of what we have here is we have two performances on the same course,
Yes.
which is very difficult. If you look at somebody who does a sea swim and it's a hilly bike course around the southwest, then it's an off-road run, as opposed to someone who just does a race at Eton
Yes.
Dorney, you could easily have like 10 minutes difference in the times there.
Yes.
But just simply due to the venue, and of course the weather is always going to be a bit different. The air pressure, the wind at Eton Dawn is always, relatively well known. But it's about as scientific as it gets here. So let's when
Yeah,
it comes to
yeah.
comparing results in triathlon at least. So 2023, we've got a 28-minute swim.
Yeah.
Which obviously, I don't know, I can't remember exactly going back now, whether you were I think you were. I mean, you were sort of slightly disappointed with the whole day at the time that you knew that you weren't working sort of at your max. But taking 3 minutes, well, 2.5 actually, taking 2.5 minutes off of that swim there. Now, being in a draft pack does help.
Hmm.
But where in your mind did that sort of, has the swim improvement the last couple of years come from?
Uh, I think it's just getting longer swims.
Hmm.
Um, I, I'm sure that the intensity in the swim work that I've been doing has made a difference, but but I remember at sort of the late stages of 2022 when I finally decided that I wanted to get into triathlon, I was congratulating myself for completing a 750-meter swim.
Mm.
Um, which, given that, as I said at the top of the show, I did have a lot of swimming background as a kid.
Mm.
was, 1 kilometer isn't a huge amount, whereas I think the longest I've done this year is a close to 4 kilometer swim
Hmm.
in open water. So that just being able to go much, much further means that I'm then able to hold a slightly higher pace when I am going, and to be more familiar with what getting the right pace for the distance.
Hmm.
Personally, I find that it's very easy for me if I'm trying to take a swim not too hard to be anywhere between 145 per 100 meters all the way through to about 205.
Yeah.
And so the more I swim, the more I can vaguely dial in what is
Hmm.
holdable at the start of an Olympic race versus holdable as a swim forever pace.
Yes. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it's now I know that you did quite a lot of swimming when you were younger,
Mm-hmm.
which makes a real difference because you have that kind of that technique baked in, as it were. But something that I think a lot of newer triathletes get sort of held up on, caught up on a little bit, is the technique aspect of it. And I am not diminishing the value of technique. I'm not saying you should never do any technique sets because we've done technique sets,
Mm-hmm.
and that you shouldn't do drills, that it's unimportant. But I think a lot of newer athletes they focus so much on the technique, they don't focus enough on just doing really long swims
Mm.
and really hard swims. They kind of have it in their head that they'll start training properly once they've got their technique down. But
Mm.
when do you ever finish having a technique? Nobody ever has the absolute perfect stroke. Even the very best swimmers, they're still doing technique sets to top things up and remind themselves of how things work. Um, and yet, going from swimming 750 meters in a session up to be able to knock out 4K obviously is a hell of a journey. And I think that is, again, one of the reasons that we've seen the drop off in that time there is
Yeah.
is just simply from that sort of that time and distance there in the water. And because for you, sort of just a relatively good swimmer, I know that if I set you a relatively tough swim in the pool, that you're going to recover from that relatively quickly.
Yeah.
I think you've actually said that you could probably do a hard session in the pool and then a hard session on the bike the next day,
Yeah.
depending on the exact sessions. If it was like a CSS test the day before, followed by FTP intervals on the bike, then that might be taking the biscuit a little bit. But if we're doing some fast 50s in the pool, that doesn't mean that you can't go out and do some hill reps the next day.
Well, exactly. I think also, especially when you're talking about hill reps, which whilst that will definitely get your heart, it gets your body far more. Yeah, my body just doesn't get beaten up in the pool,
Mm,
in the way that perhaps others do. And I definitely, if I'm going to get fatigued, it's because my aerobic fitness is a limiter, or I've just been in zone 4 or zone 5 for too
yeah,
long in the pool. Um, but yeah, by the next day, it's as not as if I didn't do the session, because that would mean that it would be
yeah,
pointless. But I feel almost fully recovered or fully recovered because my body got used to going swimming 4 or 5 times a week as a kid.
yeah, yeah. And there is no replacement for that.
Hmm.
Anybody such as myself starting out as a swimmer as an adult, we're never going to be able to catch up. So I don't want people listening to this thinking, oh, how is it that I can what's the magic session that's going to get me down to a 25-minute 1500-meter swim? I'm afraid I don't have a magic session for you.
Hmm.
It is really, it does come down to the background that you have and just the amount of hours that you spent in the pool when you were younger. And yes, obviously that's not to say that anybody who starts swimming as an adult couldn't achieve great things. They couldn't get themselves down to, down potentially down to that 25-minute mark if they really, really applied themselves. But it's going to take them a lot more work than it would take somebody with a stronger swim background. They might have to swim like 4, maybe 5 times a week to really get down up to that level of swimming,
Hmm.
which for most people it's just not practical when you consider, commuting to the pool and that, unless somebody maybe works or lives just around the corner from a pool and it's a short walk for them, that's a slightly different matter. But I know a lot of people, I mean, especially those who listen to this over in the States, it might take them 45 minutes to drive to the pool to swim.
Mm.
Um, and it's just not practical to put in the amount of volume that you need to improve in the water. And I know, even a lot of now you've seen a great improvement in your swim, but I know that some strong swimmers that I've worked with, they go, look, I know that I can put in like 5 swims a week, and I don't really get an awful lot faster than I am right now. Yes, I
Mm.
get faster, but I'm hovering around 135 per 100, and the amount of work it takes me to get down to 130, I'd much rather spend that time on the run and on the bike and in the gym.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, I can't argue with that. So yeah, I think that sums up the swim pretty well. Now moving on to the bike, looking at 2013, we've got 1 hour 20, sorry, 2023, we've got 1 hour 21, whereas today you managed it in 1 hour 7.
Mhm.
So that's a fair old chunk of change.
Yes. Yeah, I guess I was just able to hold a higher average power. Um, I mean, I don't know what went particularly differently, but yeah, I definitely was able to hold just a much higher average power across the bike. I actually fueled, which sounds ridiculous, but
Hmm.
for people that have been in the sport for a long time, they obviously know that you got to eat something, but I just didn't. Um, I certainly didn't realize sort of the things that are becoming common knowledge now, like how many grams of carbs per hour you should
Hmm.
have, and those sorts of things. The idea of actually having electrolytes um, just didn't really occur to me. And I can even see, because I just clicked on the session myself, that I got records for a number of my heart rates on the 2023 bike course, which
Hmm.
means that I was definitely cooking myself, as those heart rates are distinctly zone 5 heart rates, which possibly explains why my run was also so bad.
I think there's probably a correlation there, I'll be honest. And
Yes.
yeah, I'm looking at the power numbers now, and yeah, it's a big old difference from 95 watts to 215 watts. That's a 20-watt difference over the bike. Um, which, let's be honest, like that's pretty big. And
Mm.
it does also help the not only, I mean, the 20-watt advantage, obviously, if anyone was offered an additional 20 watts onto their average power, they'd bite your arm off. But you're
Mm.
not only putting out more power, you're also traveling more efficiently for the power that you're creating. And due to having the aero bars, which I'm pretty sure you didn't have at the time.
No,
Uh, or,
well, no, I did. I just didn't use them because I hadn't practiced enough in the position and it hurt too much.
yeah,
I have also made some slight upgrades to my bike setup in the sense that I have an aero helmet rather than a regular helmet. I
yeah,
I shaved my legs today, well, yesterday,
dedication.
and those sorts of small differences. I used race tires rather than training tires,
Yeah.
but those are towards the end of marginal gains. So the actual watt difference is greater because what you can hold sitting up is, well, certainly for me, is 20 or 30 watts higher than I can hold in the aero position. So,
I didn't realize the
a
difference was
20,
that big.
yeah, it's quite
Okay,
big for
then
me.
we need to have a look at the bike fit then because you should not be 20, 30 watts down.
Yeah,
Your chances are that you're a little bit too hunched up, you're a little bit too low, that the sort of the angles in the hips are too restricted,
hmm,
and it's impeding like maybe your chest or the areas there, and it may be worth just like taking a riser out and just lifting
yeah.
the aero bars just 10 mil higher and just see how that feels and how that impacts the amount of power that you can put out. I mean, some people, I mean, it's as with a lot of things in triathlon. Some people they will be really sensitive to these things, so there will be a large difference. Other
Mm.
people, it's broadly the same. I remember reading a book on bike fitting by a guy called Phil Burt, who did a lot of bike fits for sort of Team Sky at their peak. I'm not going to name them, but they're sort of two of the top riders. So one of them, if the centimeter was a millimeter high or a millimeter low, it would absolutely kick their butt. It would absolutely thrash them. Whereas there's another one who, if their legs were tired, they just drop their saddle by a centimeter to make it easy the next day. You know, so different people respond to things in different ways. But yeah, it sounds like that the position you're in at the moment, you know, I don't believe that the benefit that you'll get from being that additional bit lower is going to be worth
Mm.
30 watts in aero gains.
That's very possible. It's very very possible. I bought a race bike, which I think I said earlier is a Trekker Mondo, which is
Mm,
obviously designed for people who are seasoned bike racers. Because I walked into a bike shop and said, I plan to race. I would like to buy a bike. And
yeah,
so I got given a race bike, which is exactly what I asked for.
yeah.
What I should probably have decided to use as my first proper bike from when I wasn't a kid, when you're using like mountain bikes,
Mm,
is it is an endurance bike with
yeah.
a slightly nicer bike fit and a slightly more relaxed angles that mean that riding longer is more comfortable. Um, I mean, I've gotten used to it by and large. Of
Yeah.
course, I have because I'm riding a lot and I'm really enjoying it. But it was a steep learning curve that meant a lot of my races, even when I had aero bars up until this year, I
Mm,
didn't. I used them for 5 minutes and went, "Oh no, my legs are going to fall off. I can't do
right.
that."
Yeah. No, I know that we had a chat last week about, you know, the sort of having slightly higher or slightly lower output, but I didn't realize the differences were that big. Yeah, definitely something to have a bit of a look at. But when it comes to the actual training, when it comes to the interval sessions that we've been doing, when it's been come to sort of the difference between the indoor and the outdoor sessions and all that, like where do you feel, because the bike you consider to be your weakest discipline, where
Oh
do
yeah.
you feel that those sort of those 20 watts and that difference in confidence, where do you feel that's come from? And the ability to hold the aero position for longer as well.
Um, and holding the aero position for longer is just practicing it more, um, which is actually surprisingly challenging outside. The roads around me are not particularly flat. Um, Even within a 10 or 15 meter section, you're going to have bumps and dips and
Yeah.
all sorts that mean that holding the aero position on a well probably even on a TT bike, but certainly on a road
Hmm.
bike with clip-on aero bars is not the most comfortable. But having longer rides, getting a bike fit was pretty big. The first 6 months of owning a bike was horrendous because it really, really wasn't set up to fit me.
Mm.
Um, I think I think one of the things that I typically struggle with in general is that one or two intensity sessions a week plus one for swimming means that every in a month I will do two intense bike sessions and two intense run sessions, being a shorter course athlete, and so actually needing to get my legs turning over like that. Which means that you don't ever really push zone 4, zone 5 very often.
Mm.
So every time I'm asked to do an FTP test or a time trial or what have you, I don't really know where my fitness is to
Hmm.
know what numbers I should be holding because I just don't hold them enough, and my fitness is improving periodically.
Yeah.
Inevitably, the long sessions are going to make a difference, but I mean that's just building the base. The quick sessions, which I find the most fun,
Yeah.
um, will be what's pulling me up from the top, I suppose. And
Hmm.
also cross training, the fact that I'm able to get in the pool and do VO2 max intervals in the pool and stuff, really quick 100 or 200 meters, will definitely help because my aerobic fitness has just improved hugely.
Yeah. And that's what the kind of that's where I tend to start with most athletes. It's okay, you know, like, you know, we all know that the hard interval sessions are fun and they're rewarding, but we need the aerobic fitness to be able to complete them and then to be able to not for it to destroy us for sort of 2 or 3 days afterwards.
Hmm.
And obviously, like we've got to the point now with you where your aerobic fitness is brilliant. And what we need to do more of, especially as we get towards this duathlon in October, is we need to start doing 3 hard sessions a
Yeah.
week. As we start to approach that sort of that A race for you, that most important one, it being important because you're just racing against somebody you want to be competitive with, of course.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, there's always that. And getting that balance right is always a little bit of a mix of trial and error. And yes, it can be hard to to go out and to push on an FTP test or something like that if you don't really know sort of where you are. But equally, that does have the sort of the added effect of teaching you to really listen to your body.
Mm,
If somebody goes into an FTP test and goes, "I'm going to get 230 today,"
mm,
are they really, like we were going to say, what we were talking about earlier? Are they really getting the best out of themselves? Are they really showing us what they're capable of?
yeah.
So, I don't think that's necessarily, a bad thing. And what you said earlier about the that tempo session where it's 2 hours, just like go as hard as you can. Again, it's not the kind of session I dish out with any great regularity, but it is those kinds of sessions are really good for helping you find, okay, if that was my limit over 2 hours, then I
Yeah.
know that over like shorter distances, I should be able to do much more than that.
Mm,
But if I'm on like a 3, 4 hour ride and I'm putting out those numbers, then I know that chances are that I'm going a little bit too hard. And
yeah.
it's always that balancing act. Obviously professional athletes, you see these training programs on Instagram that they're doing, with these double threshold sessions. Um, and it's easy to think, oh, that's the secret, that's the key, that's what it takes. But the reason that you've seen such strong sort of improvement is the fact that you just keep showing up.
Yes, I think that is very noticeable. Just showing up week on week, month on month for uh, uh, I think since January I've been very
Yeah,
consistent
you
this
have.
year
Yeah.
in for 2025. 2024 was a rough year for me from a work perspective, and I kind of mostly took it off from a triathlon
Hmm.
perspective. So there's lots of maybe doing one run or one bike or one swim in a week. Maybe
Hmm.
I got spicy and did one of all three. But really,
Yeah.
my fitness went from being able to run a 22 and a half minute 5K in 2023 to in January, I went for a local sort of beginners fun run group session thing
Yeah.
where we decided we were going to do a fast run, and I realized I couldn't hold a pace to cover 5K in 29 minutes.
Mm.
And that that made me pull my finger out. That's quite the drop in fitness.
So can you just talk us through, um, because I think that's quite interesting. Firstly, tell us how it is that you got into triathlon,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll discuss the journey we've been on this year to get to where we are.
Sure. So the way that I got into triathlon was in 2022. I was living in a lovely little country village that put on its own sort of fun run 5K. And I didn't have a sports watch. I didn't have anything. I'd never really taken endurance sports very seriously before. And I decided that I wanted to get a bit fitter. So I got myself a Fitbit, which, by the way, was terrible. It could not track my pace or heart rate or anything. Um, I think it had me doing a 20-minute 5K as my first ever run, which is nonsense. But I started spending time on YouTube trying to work out how to improve at running. And when you type into YouTube things like get a 25-minute 5K, in the UK at the very least, two things come up: the running channel and GTN. And suddenly, as I'm consuming more and more content about how to improve at running from GTN, I realized that I could swim and I had a good background in it. And I knew how to ride a bike from when I was a kid. And actually, that sounded kind of cool. So I I decided that I wanted to take running a bit more seriously in the short term and signed up for a plan to do the Oxford Half Marathon in October of 2022. realizing I knew almost nothing about training, and GTN's insistence that getting a coach is quite useful, I reached out to a couple of coaches, including you, and ultimately we started working together, because I got one of your sort of not off the shelf plans, but a plan where you write, X number of weeks of training ahead of time, and it's sort of plan on a page set in stone. You're not going to touch it. I'm not going to really talk to you at all. But I've now
Yeah.
got a training plan in
Just
training
a
peak.
bespoke plan that I wrote you. You gave me all the information about you, what it is that you wanted to achieve, and we had discussion, and I created a plan and left that with you for you to go out and to complete it in your own time.
Exactly. And in the end, I never ended up running the Oxford Half Marathon, because I got COVID, like a week and a half out from the event, which
Uh,
was not the best. But because I was completely unable to train, having gotten quite into it for the 2 months prior, I decided that I would actually commit to learning how to cycle properly, not just when you're a kid getting the pedals to turn, but
yeah, yeah.
actually learning bike handling skills and things, and to try for a triathlon. And so once I'd recovered from COVID, I reached back out to you to get another one of the structured plans for a duathlon this time. And I had a view that ultimately, if I continued to be interested, I would do a triathlon.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of swimming in there. Mostly it was running and biking, because that's what a duathlon is. And I showed up to this duathlon. It was a standard distance duathlon because I knew I could cycle 20K and I knew I could run a 5K. And I thought, well, where's the challenge in that? Let's do the standard one. And trying to complete a standard distance duathlon with absolutely no fueling, 750 mils of water in a water bottle that you're scared to reach while you're cycling,
Mm-hmm.
and taking over 3 hours really kicks your butt. And as much as, I got like almost shooting pains in my legs trying to finish the run because I'd overbiked, um, and I hadn't gone very hard on the bike either. I was just not very fit. I finished it, got the rush of adrenaline and endorphins, and went, yeah, that was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to you again to start doing coaching properly, which prompted my proper start of a triathlon career. Sounds too serious, but triathlon
Yes.
journey.
And how does the experience compare for you between like trying to work it out for yourself, having that bespoke plan, and then having that coaching relationship? Like how where do you see like the big jumps? Like where do you see the value?
So trying to work out for myself, I I would say that unless you have a background in endurance sports or have been coached properly before and really read into things, it's going to be a bit hopeless. You're going to go out for a run. It's probably not going to be doing the things you want it to do, and you're going to struggle. I certainly did. In terms of a structured plan on a page, I think that probably is a really good place to start. I think as long as you are entirely realistic with what is capable to be achieved, um, and you are the type of person that is very happy to be left to it, I
Hmm.
think that is a really good place to start. I personally, I would say that you should probably try and do at least one event, even if it's a small event. Just having bought something off Training Peaks or reached out to a coach to
Hmm.
do something like that, um, rather than either trying to go with no training at all or to reach out to a coach first time and discover actually I hate that and I've spent hundreds and hundreds of pounds on on coaching for something I don't even enjoy.
Mm.
Um,
I always try to, caution people against, especially investing in equipment
yeah.
for stuff if they don't know if it's going to be for them. You don't need to get yourself an expensive TT bike ahead of your first race.
Oh yeah. No, that's definitely true, and you
You
definitely
know.
won't use it to its full capabilities, even if you do. But personally, the value I found stepping up from a sort of more bespoke plan that was
Mm.
set, and just do it, versus working with you as a coach, is that I have plenty of questions which it's really helpful for you to answer. There's specific people are going to respond to different sessions, different trainings differently.
Mm.
Some people work slightly better with extra intensity. Some people think they do, but they really don't.
That's a lot of people, actually.
Yes. Um, and and also things like working out what to do, in races, sort of racecraft, and trying to pace yourself, working out when does it make sense to do threshold tests versus just doing a hard session.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I probably have sent you 250 messages in the past month that you've
Something like that,
responded
yeah.
to. It's a fair number, and yeah, obviously you do take the time to respond to them all. But even with all of the resources that the internet provides, things cross my mind that aren't easily found online, and having someone that has been in the sport for a large number of years, but not just in the sport, but who has done a number of different coaching certifications,
Mm.
understands physiology, has done, can answer lots of more technical questions, as well as just someone that's done a few races and knows some things. And I find
Yeah, yeah,
that really, really valuable. Also, of course, the flexibility to change up your sessions. On a week to week basis.
yeah.
My bike's going in for a service and next week, and I
Yeah,
wouldn't have been able to tell you that 3 months ago if I'd asked you to build a 4 month plan or what have you.
yeah, yeah.
And then I'd just be missing sessions or guessing or trying to work things out. At which point, what's the point of paying for these types of things? So
Yeah. And there's also a conversation we had yesterday
yes,
where you had a little bit of tendon pain in your foot, and we just had a short I think it was a 10-minute chat on the phone. Do I do this race or not?
yep,
And those are the kinds of judgment calls that can be really difficult to make yourself on your own. And luckily, we both went into that call with the mindset of, look, this is one of the more important races for you this year. The pain doesn't seem that bad. We've just got to roll the dice and see how it goes, but not be afraid to pull out if, if things for some reason suddenly really become like horrifically painful. Um, but going back to what you're saying about messaging,
mm,
and having questions. I think that yes, there are lots of things that cross your mind because you're quite a curious person about that it's hard to get the answers to. But equally, there are lots of things like if you were to Google online, what is the best helmet? What is the best training methodology? What are the best bike sets for muscular endurance? You're going to come back and you have opinion after opinion after opinion.
mm,
Some of those opinions are going to be very well informed, and they're going to be coaches at the top of the sport who are all going to be sort of sharing their ideas, often in a generally less of an argumentative fashion. Because most sort of coaches who are, right at the top of their game, they're more interested in collaborating with other coaches, learning from they can, where it tends to be the less experienced coaches who tend to be the ones who are shouting from the rooftops and getting into arguments on Twitter. But it's I can certainly speak for my younger self, within that at least. Um, but it's also just having somebody A who knows who you are and who has kind of a coaching methodology and can give you a reasoned answer based on that, based on what they know about you and your training and what motivates you and everything that comes with that. It is really difficult to get that kind of impartial opinion from the internet. And a lot of people, they tend to fall into a trap where they go, okay, right, I'm going to watch 3 videos from 3 different viewpoints on this subject. But not for most people, the first one they listen to will be the one they immediately sympathize with, and they're expecting, and when they watch the other 2 or 3 videos, they're looking at them from a critical angle, expecting them to disprove what they learned in that first video. And we have that kind
mm,
of that bias that comes with that. Whereas not only have you spent, an hour of your time watching three videos on one subject and you still don't really know what was going on, if you have a coach you can just drop a message to and go, hey, what do you think of this? And I can either reply going, yeah, it's a load of nonsense, or hey, let's give it a go and see if it works.
Mm.
Then it saves a lot of time. And of course, there's nothing to say that you shouldn't go out and learn. I encourage people to go out and learn. But if somebody is busy, if somebody has a wife, you got married recently, if
Yep.
somebody has, especially like children, work long hours, like how much time do you have to sit and trawl through the internet looking for answers on training? Because surely that's time that people would rather spend actually training.
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I also think that in the internet you can find a video to agree with or disagree with just about any point that you hold.
Absolutely, yeah.
I can think of 5 YouTubers off the top of my head that think that tubeless tires are the worst things in the world, and I know at least five that will die on the hill of tubeless tires, even
hmm
in 23 mil 33 mil tires. Yeah, at 105 psi. It can be a bit of an echo chamber, and so having someone that's kind of been there and done that and got got certifications to back up what they're saying does
But
help.
on the subject of tubeless tires, about 6 weeks ago, you said to me, "Should I try tubeless tires?" And I said, "Yeah, a lot of people try and never go back." You then had a
Mm-hmm.
horrific experience with a tubeless
Yes.
tire, not only setting them up, but also one just completely failing on you during a long ride.
Yep.
And you're just like, no, like I can't be dealing with this.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
it's a case, I didn't, I encourage you to try tubeless tires. Tubeless tires, like it was clear that it was more in your head than it was anything else. But I wasn't going to sit there and go, no, tubeless tires are the best. I'm going to die on the hill that you need to keep on riding tubeless. It's a case of okay, well, like, if you want to go back to tubeless, then that's not the end of the world. And that kind of nuance does get lost in in sort of the tribalism that comes with such things as clinchers versus tubeless, or rim brakes versus disc brakes, or canyon versus specialized, and people find themselves in these camps, and it's difficult to kind of, like you say, get out of that echo chamber.
Yeah. I would say that in the race today, I watched four different people have to walk their bikes to the end of the bike course because their tubeless tires failed, and they either couldn't get their tire like properly failed, and they either couldn't get their tire off, couldn't get an inner tube in, or just didn't have spares. There was one person that got a puncture, and I could tell immediately just went, "Well, this is over." They didn't carry any spares, which is stupid. You should carry some spares, even if it's like a
Yeah,
butyl inner tube. But
yeah,
but tubeless isn't everything. It is, however, if it especially in shorter races, if it saves you one puncture, it probably is worth it if you can be bothered with the faff. And it
yeah.
is the most rolling resistant efficient system. I can change clincher tires with TPU tubes much faster if anything does go wrong.
There is a lot to be said for sort of keeping just sort of sticking to what you know and what you're confident with. Yeah, I mean, I know some people they won't carry spares over a short race because they go like PB or bust. I'm going to
Yeah.
put on some time trial tires, and I'm going to save the 200 grams from not
Mm.
carrying a spare inner tube with me because by the time that I stop and I'm repairing a tire, I know that I've not got my PB, so why should I bother? And it's an opinion, certainly. It's well, an ethos, I should say. It's not something that I would ever subscribe to. I think I just sort of enjoy the sport and the racing and
Mm.
the atmosphere more than I do obsessing over PBs. But that's me, and I can't pretend to speak for other people or what may motivate them. I mean, I didn't actually cover um the run, but we'll dovetail into that. So, last year was rough for you, and
Yep.
then you came to me in January and you said, I want a program. I want something that's focused on running and strength.
Yep.
and it was focused sort of simply on that. You asked for me to include some sessions with the local run group.
Yep.
So can you chat to me how we went from that to sort of where it is today with this big old PB?
So I think at the start of the year, as I say, it was sort of New Year's resolution that there are a bunch of runners around my area that aren't affiliated with any local running group, and someone said, "Hey, why don't we all just meet up at 8 o'clock by this sort of communal area? If people want to show up, do. We'll see how many show up. We'll go for an easy run." And I think this particular person wanted to kind of get a sort of 2 or 3 sessions a week done, especially over the winter months, and have sort of an easy run on a Wednesday, a more intense run on a Friday, and a long run on a Sunday. Probably having looked at something online.
Yeah.
And so I showed up to the easy run, and that was fine because it was genuinely easy and had a couple stops. And then we tried to do a fast run, and as I said earlier, I think I covered 5K in 29 minutes and was breathing out my ass. And having been a lot fitter than that, I felt very motivated to improve, but also realized that showing up and having people around me did encourage me to show up to sessions,
Hmm.
especially when the motivation was low. And doing something was better than doing nothing. So across the winter, especially early January and February this year, it was sub-zero for a good couple weeks.
Mm.
Um, Getting out and doing stuff was hard. So having a group of people that were looking forward to seeing you helped. Um, and getting some strength done was a purely vanity thing. Although useful for triathlon for a lower body and having sort of one session a week, doing 3 gym sessions a week, some of which are focused entirely on upper body, is probably not super important. But I wanted to do it, and and so that's what I asked for. But slowly but surely, as I got the dedication and the routine back of training, and I was regaining my old fitness, suddenly doing a 5 kilometer run across 40 minutes with 2 stops in it just wasn't it anymore.
Mm.
And so whilst I definitely plan to go back once we hit the off season, just for the social aspect of it for a little bit,
Mm. Oh
um,
yeah, yeah,
to have a proper off season, go with the local cycling group, which is relatively slow. It's not like a chain gang. It's uh,
yeah.
you
Coffee and
know,
cake.
but, yes, exactly. But do some of those sessions while I have all this fitness, but also it's the off season, so I don't need to be killing myself. Especially because I have asked you to kill me over these next 2 months as I hit my A race.
You have
Um,
that to look
I,
forward to.
yeah, I found that eventually I just needed more. I was able to run faster than most of the people in that session, and because they're group sessions, and they're no drop sessions, you've got to cater to the slowest people. And I knew I could do more.
Hmm.
So I started getting more interested in the idea of doing triathlons. I can't remember exactly when it was in the year that I transitioned, but I think it was February or March, where I was doing more triathlon focused stuff than I was entirely running and strength. And slowly, then, as I set my sights on races across this summer, the strength work also petered out, the light came back, and I became a lot more motivated to train. And once you're used to training, well, for me it's 6 days a week, about an hour
Hmm.
most days, other than on the weekends where it might be an hour and a half, or well, the long bike rides are getting longer still, but the runs are no longer than an hour and a half. It's once you've got that routine in place, it isn't as hard to, you're doing 45 minutes or an hour, doesn't matter so much because you're already in the mindset that you're leaving the door to go
Hmm.
do a session. And it could be a half-hour session if you're just starting out, which I think some of them were, looking back at
Yeah,
January.
yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, I can see, easy 30-minute swims and stuff, just to get in the habit of exercising. But yeah, there's very little cycling, having looked back, and it's pretty much all running and gym stuff. And slowly but surely it transitions across the across the months.
And that was the plan really with that little sort of running and strength plan that I put together for you. It was just to help create that habit.
Hmm.
So that instead of you finding reasons not to go out and do something, that you kind of you'd look at the schedule because I think that like mentally there can be like a big difference between a 30-minute run and an hour run.
Yep.
Like a 30-minute run, you kind of think, well, it's quite hard to talk yourself out of that, really. It's quite hard to tell yourself that you don't have, okay, sort of 30 minutes, maybe roll up to like 40 minutes once you've got sort of changed, and
Hmm.
all of that and the faff that goes alongside it. Whereas an hour run can often come closer to sort of to an hour 10, and you have to get up half an hour earlier if you want to do that. And if you set that bar too high when somebody starts out, if you okay, we're going to hit the ground running, we're going to go from nothing to training 6 days a week, an hour every single weekday, and then we're going to put in like 3 4 hour sessions on both weekend days. I mean, people they can keep that up for like a week. They go, yeah, I'm going to get into it, and then they'll just go like, I just don't want to, like, I can't. And they try to find reasons not to, because they're tired,
Yep.
and that's fine. Once you, like you say, once you've created that habit, once you've created that mindset, you can then slowly start to creep up some of the midweek sessions. Suddenly, like an hour 10, an hour 15 doesn't feel like it's like really taking the mickey. You're going to think, well, I want to get better, I want to get faster. And part of that is going to be these longer sessions. And you have to find that tipping point. So we do some double sessions on sort of the Wednesday and the Thursday with regards to the pool
Yep.
quite often as well. It's trying to find that tipping point of when it gets too much, when it's too much time, when it's too much intensity, and when you're trying to find that kind of that tipping point, when you're trying to find where the edges where you fall off, that can be really difficult to pinpoint, especially on your own.
Yes, I definitely relate to that. I mean, even with pool sessions, um, because my local pool has particularly strange hours during the week, if I see a session that will take me an hour and 20 minutes in the pool to do, or if I saw it in the past, particularly when it's drills focused, which
Mm.
means that it's less motivating, I would more often than not skip it. And
Hmm.
then I'm in the habit of skipping it. And I know we had a conversation where I said, "Hey, this one session,
Yes,
um,
I was just
it,
going to say that.
yeah, this one session, I can look back through my training. I just never show up for this.
Mm.
So probably better to find something else to do that's maybe a bit shorter. And I
Yeah,
suspect it could probably be put back in my training now because I'm now in the habit of on a Wednesday and a Thursday, I go to the pool. So I've
yeah,
got a session, so I'm going.
yeah.
But when when you're not so much in the habit, it's still mentally a question, and then you see something that's going to take forever, and the pool is only open for 2 hours, which means you have to leave your house. For me, anyway, I've got to leave my house at 6:45 p.m., which means I've got to have either already eaten dinner or be eating dinner at 9 p.m. To get
Hmm.
this session done, and I know it's going to be busy, and I'm doing the drills. It was just a non-starter at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember when you said that, I think that I think I've missed this four times in a row now. I was like, this isn't a hill worth dying on. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to sit there and insist that you get this really super important set done. Because I mean, I like doing that. Where it was for sort of the reference people, it's sort of unco drills, single arm drills, stroke timing, stroke breathing, stuff which it can be a bit cumbersome. It's not the most elegant of sets to do.
especially when you're doing
And it's
3K of it.
Yeah, it's not the shortest set either.
Yeah,
I tell you what, I'll give you a shorter version this week and we see how we get on there.
sure, why
Um,
not?
um, yeah, and it's finding that balance. It's finding what not only what somebody needs, but also what motivates someone at the same time. And that's something I'd like to think I've got a better like sense of in more recent years, is trying to find out, what are people going to actually like show up and give me their best for. Um, and that's different for each person. And it's about sort of trying to find that balance. Now, you do enjoy going really hard, as a lot of
Oh yeah.
people do. And as a result, you've made what, in my opinion, is a rather smart decision of going, you know what, I'm going to really focus on doing sprint and Olympic distances because I really like this intensity. The mistake that a lot of people have done, and so many people have come to me in the past and they've said, Simon, sorry, that's my dog. She's been an absolute nightmare today. I thought I'd switch the lights off to calm her down a bit, but it doesn't seem to have worked. Um, I want to do Ironman because they see Ironman as being the ultimate endurance sport challenge, and I go, okay, cool. Let's train for an Ironman then. And then they complain that they're not doing loads of threshold sessions in a week, and that a lot of it is longer training, and it's going, look, I understand and I appreciate the appeal that comes with Iron Man and the bragging rights that come with Iron Man. But how many people have completed an Iron Man relative to the amount of people who've gone under 2 hours 20 on Olympic triathlon?
Hmm.
And I think that next year we can definitely get you under 220.
I'd like to think
If you
so.
did 222 today, that's a nice little benchmark 220 to get
Hmm.
under that. But you've chosen sort of to focus on your strengths and what it is that you enjoy and what motivates you, rather than, oh, I just want to do an Ironman so I can say that I've done an Ironman. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing Ironman at all if you really get off on the long stuff. Some people hate doing interval work. Some people hate doing hard sessions, and they'd rather just go all day at a steady pace. Sure, like longer stuff is perfect for you. But if as a person you are wired for shorter distances and the kind of training that's involved with them, that's where you kind of need to start. And if you are a very high-end Ironman athlete, so if you've done 3 or 4 Ironmans, well, probably not even 3 or 4, if you've done a couple of Ironmans and you've finished them both, and you go, I really want to get faster, then yeah, that is when you do need to include more in the way of intensity to help give you that kind of that foot speed and build up everything related to that. But if you're just looking to complete your first Ironman, nobody cares what your 5K time is when you're walking the marathon because you overbiked or you didn't have the fitness for the bike. It's a completely different kettle of fish. I know we've sort of batted around the idea of doing a 70.3
Hmm.
in future, but there's so much that you can do with the shorter races, and they also tend to fit into your life a bit better. I know
Yeah.
that you have hobbies and interests outside of triathlon.
Yes.
You have other things in your life, and I think that if you're looking for balance in your life, then shorter distance can probably be the way to go. If you're looking for purpose in your life, if you feel yourself at a complete loose end, then it's like throwing yourself into an Ironman can be a really great way to achieve that because of how much you can dedicate yourself to it and the results that you can see. But I think a lot of people sort of underestimate the shorter stuff, and if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. I'm never going to force somebody into doing it, but there's no shame in doing shorter stuff. It's no lesser an achievement if that's the kind of thing that you enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Um, yeah, I think that obviously there are different methodologies and opinions on this. I know there's one person that's relatively active on YouTube that spends most of the winter prescribing their athletes VO2 max intervals and things, even if they're doing
Mhm.
Ironmans, just on the basis that trying to do 5 hour rides in the winter is horrendous. And so they almost flip it the other way and do the long rides in the summer right before an Ironman and the interval stuff further
Yeah,
away.
I mean, VO2 max is essential for all athletes. It's kind of where the question, sort of for me at least as a coach, the more questionable stuff is around that zone 3, zone 4 level.
Hmm.
Whereas sprint and Olympic athletes will be doing a lot more of those sessions.
Yep.
For longer distance athletes, it can be much more sort of polarized in, look, we're going to do long sessions to improve our aerobic fitness, and we're going to do VO2 max sessions to improve our aerobic fitness. And the muscular endurance aspect that you get from the tempo rides and the harder sessions, it's still there, but it makes up a much smaller quantity of the training relative to sort of sprint and Olympic,
Hmm.
where it is going to be sort of a lot harder. And that's one of the things that really like threw me about an AI program that you and I both had a bash with and both had pre poor experiences with, which is, where I told it I wanted to do a 70.3 this summer, it just gave me loads of tempo stuff in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm really not sure this is. I'm really no tempo and threshold actually. Just loads of like threshold work. I just think I don't really see like from my own, and it's difficult for me to switch off that coach brain, but I don't see how that is going to help me achieve what it is that I'm after. It feels like it's just giving me what it feels that it should give. But again, like reverse periodization
Hmm.
where you are doing more intensity in the winter and you're doing more volume in the summer, I think that's totally valid, and that can definitely be well, if somebody like a good end of season race is the perfect way to get that balance right, because you may
Hmm.
not actually really start the hard training until February.
Yeah.
And if you're only doing a 2.5 hour long ride, you can probably do that on the turbo most of the time. And by the time you get onto the 3 hour rides, it's actually warming up outside.
Hmm.
Obviously, loads of different. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. I'm not really sure on where we're going with this, but lots of ways, lots of different approaches, and none of them are especially like wrong for the most
Hmm.
part. Sometimes strange things just work for people, so I always try to be open-minded with what it is
Hmm.
that people could achieve. Anyway, so going to wrap things up a little bit. First of all, we didn't touch on the run after all, did we? So the run I have looking at 2023, we got a 45 minutes, and today you did it in
Other way around.
45 minutes. There
No,
we go.
it was 1 hour versus 45 minutes.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong window. I've got the wrong
You
training
said
peaks window
45
open.
minutes versus 45 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
was
that's
one
that's
hour
what that's
versus.
yeah, yeah. No, I see that now. Yes, I was looking at this year's race and comparing it to what I had on my phone, which is the screenshot you sent me earlier. Yeah,
Yes.
15 minutes. That's quite an improvement. And it was. Do you think that's from like your run fitness, your approach to the bike?
I think it's a mixture of the approach to the bike. I almost certainly overbiked in the last one. If I remember correctly, granted it was a couple of years ago, but I seem to remember just feeling terrible on that 1 hour run, like the whole
Mm,
time. Um, and whereas today, I mean, I felt tired, but I felt good for just about all of the run right up until the last couple of kilometers where I put my foot down
yeah,
and was getting close to redlining it, at which point obviously you don't feel so good. But
yeah, yeah.
but that was the point, and it was
Yes.
done intentionally rather than just feeling terrible and that I wanted to walk the whole time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think I am much more easily able to run to feel now. I
Hmm.
I guess because we've done a lot of brick sessions that I am more able to find a pace that is going to work for me for the distance I'm doing quite quickly.
Hmm.
I mean, I think I started the run today, for example, at the pace that I just about averaged for the entire run.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, there
so
wasn't much difference.
yeah, so it was a relatively well paced run, which I think does make a difference. And I mean, it was a personal best for the run, so I couldn't possibly have planned that. To get a personal best on an Olympic duathlon or triathlon. Why do I keep saying duathlon? Triathlon is is not something you can really expect or plan for, even if it's fantastic. So it was
Oh,
just
it
feeling
is.
my body and
Yeah.
knowing what that was.
I mean, chance like obviously if you'd have done hard 10K all out a couple of weeks ago, that you'd been a couple of minutes, 90 seconds, something like that faster doing that that straight 10K.
Possibly, yeah.
Um, and so I mean, you would normally expect that you to give away a little bit
Hmm.
over the Olympic triathlon there. but it's still an absolutely fantastic experience. And the last thing I wanted to sort of have a chat with you through really here
Mhm.
is looking at the Olympic distance. Sorry, what kind of, what are your, what are you, looking at the result today? What motivates you to train harder for next year? Is it looking at the time? Is it looking at, well, what would it take for me to get, to get closer to the podium for my age group? Because it looked like your age group today made up a massive proportion of the field, unfortunately. It was a field of 188
Mhm.
and 40 were in your age group.
Oh, I think that screenshot is slightly out of date. I took it shortly after I finished. So,
Okay.
the actual numbers, unless you're looking at the real data,
No, let me
um,
load that window up while you buy me some time.
yeah, but I mean, it is definitely true that the field was very very competitive. Um, Most of the people that overtook me on the bike had the aero sock sleeves and the TT
Hmm.
bikes and the helmets and all sorts of stuff, and I'm sure they completely outran me, but they were so far off by
So
the time I got off the bike anyway.
you say that. I actually looked at the guy who finished third
Uh-huh.
before we started this conversation because I thought, like, how far off are you from him? What would it
Hmm.
take for you to be able to? So, I'm not sure I can find his name fast enough, but his swim was the same as yours, high
Hmm.
25 minutes. The bike was significantly faster, but he actually ran 2 minutes slower than you.
Oh.
So it's one of those, I think, okay, well, if we can really invest a lot of time into the bike, and again, that's just one person. This is
Yeah.
somebody who could have been cycling for decades,
Hmm.
and they've recently picked up triathlon. They've not been running long. We don't know this guy's story, and there's only so much you can afford to compare yourself against each other, against other people. But there's just, that there is definite sort of potential there that, it's not out of the question if you actually to be knocking on the door of that age group podium and looking at the results here. So yeah, you are ninth in your category.
Yes.
So it seems that hasn't changed. And then 39th out of your gender. So I think that's obviously it was a really competitive. It was a stacked age group, and you always have to prepare for that and the possibility that you're not going to be in control of who else
Mm.
shows up, and that if you base your entire sense of self-worth on whether you get a podium or a top five or a top 10 in your age group, and you get a bunch of absolute racing snakes turn up, it doesn't mean that you haven't bettered yourself. It doesn't mean that you could have done anything more to achieve your goal. It just means that the wrong people are there on the day for you to help achieve that, which sucks. But it's why it does help to zoom out and go, okay, well, if we manage to get you down to like 218, 217 next year, but that only got you to fifth, still an absolutely massive improvement.
Yeah. I think to answer the question you asked originally, which is what motivates me or what is going
Mm,
to continue to motivate me, I think I am a very competitive person. A lot of people consider themselves competitive, and I guess I'm in that group. But
mm,
the thing that's motivated me the most this year, and will probably continue to motivate me next year, is that I have a particular incredibly close friend that I'm competing against in the duathlon in a couple of months. That I've known since I was 7, uh, and so we're both pushing each other to new fitness heights. He's certainly the fittest he's been. I'm definitely the fittest I've been,
mm.
and he is one of the group of people that hasn't learned how to swim, and said that he would learn how to swim so that we can compete in my preferred sport because he considers himself a rower and a cyclist.
Yeah.
Um, and so he's going to learn how to swim next year and continue competing against me, but in duathlons, in triathlons, in cycling races, and
Yeah.
that for me is what's going to continue motivating me. I
Yeah.
also would like to certainly podium in my age group, but I have a sort of wild dream in some number of years' time
Mm-hmm.
that I'm able to put on a GB tri suit.
Yep.
At an age group uh,
Mm-hmm.
race, but that's somewhere far off in the distance, at least a few years from now, if not further away.
Mm.
Um, that's not a realistic short-term goal, and therefore can't really motivate me very much. I'm not that kind of person that can pick
It
a thing 3 years off
it helps to
and aim
have,
for that.
I mean, it helps to have a long-term goal. It helps to have a vision of the
Yeah.
kind of thing that you'd love to do. And I think by spreading yourself out, going, okay, well, this year I just want to beat my mate. Next year I'm probably still going to want to beat my mate. And then a few years down the line, maybe I'll like try to qualify for my age group. Maybe that will take me 2 or 3 years to actually achieve that. After that, maybe I'll look at a bit of middle distance.
Hmm.
And then see where I want to go from there, and that, and then maybe I can start looking towards sort of Ironman and whether I can look at some like maybe I could even qualify for the World Championships there. I mean that then is like a 15 years of motivation and goals and adventures and all things that you could achieve. And if your friend wants to come along with you and keep doing those things, then all the better. And
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with saying I want to complete an Ironman next year. I do think it's more like it's just more fun to do it, to stretch it out. You're making the most out of you're not speed running the game.
Hmm.
You're taking your time and you're enjoying all the aspects that the hobby has to offer, because once you've bought your expensive biking gear, you might as well get a few years of use out of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, anything else you want to add? Any other tips you want to share with the listeners, or do you just want to go and have a sleep?
Uh, I wouldn't mind having some sweets and a nap. I can't think of anything else that I could possibly add that hasn't been said either on this podcast or on, GTN or some of those other very popular places.
Yeah.
Carry spares because I watch people DNF today.
Yeah, I mean, not only carry spares, but also know how to use them.
Yeah.
I think is you can't afford to be sat there with an inner tube just staring at it, expecting it to somehow install itself into your bike. It's yeah, of course it's important over the Olympic distance, but over longer distances especially. If you've flown over to the other side of the world to do a big Ironman event, like you need to know how to fix a puncture.
Yes, indeed. And typically, I think with those, if you are following airline protocol, you're supposed to entirely uninflate your tires before you
Indeed,
put your
yes.
bike. So you have to know how to either set up tubeless or put it in a tube, whatever works.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, Elliot, thank you for taking the time on
No
the
problem.
day after your race. I thought it'd be good to have a chat with you in the evening of, while you're still enthused by it all.
Yes.
And yeah, thanks for sharing your insights with the listeners. I'm sure they appreciated them. And yeah, I will chat to you very soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Simon.
Cheers, Elliot.
Bye.
Thank you once again to Elliot for taking the time to chat with me rather than just going to bed at 7 o'clock. I really do appreciate it. Now, if you want results like Elliot, if you're interested in any kind of plan, whether it's that, just the bespoke plan on its own that you discussed about, or that, that full coaching relationship where you can ask me all of your questions, please just drop me a message, let me know. I know it can be a bit intimidating, or, I'm not sure that I'm worth his time. I'm not sure he coaches people like me. Trust me, I do. I've coached people from beginners to Kona qualifiers. you know, I have the experience, I have the needs to help you achieve your goals. So don't be afraid. Drop me an email. My email is down in the show notes, or just have a poke about my website, see if there are any of my coaching programs that may interest you if the bespoke option isn't within your budget. I have just released a series of Ironman programs if you are pursuing that distance, and I'll leave a link in there to them. So thank you once again for your company this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Really hope you learned something, and I'll see you all again next week.